It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. Got another special episode for you today. I'm going to play back a recent interview I did with comic book writer Sarah Cho. She and I sat and we talked about Red Light, her series over at AWA Studios that's currently out. Issue 3 recently dropped last week, so it's on bookshelves today. And issue 4, the final issue of the series, comes out later this spring. So I get a chance to sit with her and talk about her thoughts behind how she put the project together. It was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. If you've been following the picks of the week, you've known that I would pick that book as probably my favorite outside of the Resistance universe, which says a lot coming from the folks over at AWA. You know, I've always been high on the things that they've been putting out. So the fact that this is one of my favorites outside of the Resistance universe over at AWA really says a lot about how this book is structured and how it looks and just the whole storyline of it. And I even made point of that as I spoke with her. So ironically, this is Sarah's first foray into comic book writing. I actually thought that she may have done a graphic novel or two prior to this, but as you see in the interview, this is actually her first. And again, just based on that, just tells you how good of a job she's done. Now, she does have a history in screenwriting and just writing in general, so that kind of helps in that transition to a comic book writer. But it was a really good conversation that I had with her. It was about 30 minutes that she and I sat and spoke, so I don't want to keep on talking just about the book all on my own. I'm going to go ahead and just let you hear the interview that I had with Sarah, and when we get back, we'll talk about some of the comics that have come out over the past few weeks and my thoughts on them before closing things out. So with that being said, here is my interview with comic book writer Sarah Cho. I hope you enjoy. Hey folks, it's Theo. I am sitting here with Sarah Cho, writer of Red Light from AWA Studios. Sarah, welcome to the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So I am going to be honest and tell myself a little bit. So I first picked up Red Light because Theo is a nerd and Theo has a degree in history. So when he sees the term red light, the first thing that comes to his mind is red light districts. And me being from New Orleans is famous for having several of them. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick this up and see what futuristic red light districts are all about. And boy, was I wrong, because red light is really not what it's about. And truth be told, I am so happy. It is an awesome story that I'm glad I picked up on that whim. If you all read the picks of the week for this week, you saw that it is my favorite non-resistance book, and that says a lot considering my love for the Resistance universe that J. Michael Straczynski has out there. But Sarah, tell me, where did the idea of this story come from? Where did Red Light, how did that pitch come to you?
Yeah, so there were a couple different avenues to where my brain kind of got to this idea. I think the main concept that I became really fascinated with was the connection between sex and technology. So sex has kind of been the forefront of every technological boom. Like with the internet, the reason it proliferated so quickly is because of pornography. With the printing press, porn also had a hand in that. And so I thought that with AI, the future of it would also be dependent on sex. So that was really kind of the first thought that I had. And then there were kind of other seedlings of interactions that I had that kind of contributed to it. I had a conversation with a writer that was talking about how a lot of sex workers, their clients go to them just to have a conversation so they can have someone that can hear them and see them. And so that's kind of how Lacey came about. And I also had an interview with this sex doll creator, and he was talking about how people often use sex dolls as a way to get over a relationship or a divorce or to grieve a wife. And so that's also kind of something that contributed to this universe. So it's kind of a little bit of everything, but it's really this connection between sex and technology that I think is central to how this idea came about.
Yeah, so again, Red Light is set in the future, and it focuses on Lacey. Lacey is a sex worker, but not quite like a sex worker we see today. She is AI, an android. But unlike the other AIs in this world, she's been equipped with empathy. So she feels empathetic for some of her clients. Why did you make her empathetic? Why was that important?
I think for me, it kind of goes back to human needs. And I think there are two really primal needs that human beings have. One is sex, and the other one is to be understood and to be seen. And so I thought that in this futuristic red light world, empathy would have a lot of value, even in sex work. And on a personal note, I'm someone that really believes in the importance of empathy. I'm not going to say I'm a great human being, but I have a pretty high degree of empathy for other people in general. And so I think that I really wanted to create a character that I saw myself in and to kind of tell a bit of my story, even though I'm not a robot and I'm not in a red light district. Her personal story is something that I really relate to and is what I wanted to put on the page.
Okay. Well, the story also focuses not just on her relationship with her clients. And of course, there's also this relationship, quote unquote, with Mr., her master, more or less. But then there's also this relationship with young Natalie. How did you go about drawing that character into this world? Why is she so important?
Yeah, I think Natalie is really, really important because she's kind of the impetus. She's that final straw that really drives Lacey to try to escape her prison. I think if she had never met Natalie, she wouldn't have tried to escape. She wouldn't have tried to run away. But because she has empathy for this young girl, and empathy is her key character trait, she wants to help this little girl see the outside world. And so that's why she becomes so important in Lacey's journey.
Okay, so we're now going to go a little bit over the spoiler wall here, because now issue number 3 is out on bookshelves. If you're not picking it up, I strongly, strongly recommend that you do, or you can get it electronically. But we're now at issue 3. At the end of issue 2, Natalie and Lacey make their escape, and Mr. is not happy about it.
Yeah.
We're now going into issue 3, and they're experiencing the world as it is in red light. What thought did you put into how you wanted this world to look?
Yeah, I wanted to create a world that was really engaging for the readers. And I also wanted to envision a world that, based on kind of how our world is already heading in, what it would look like. So, for example, in issue number 3, there's a scene where they see a robot rumble. And essentially, it's a UFC fight with robots, right? And so I really wanted to take our world as it is and think about how it could evolve with the use of AI.
And it seems as as she's watching this, she finds out a lot more about humanity that she never experienced in the brothel. She had this idea, of course, and of course she had this idea that Mr. kept placing it in her, but now she can see it front and center, and she doesn't seem too happy about it. She has a different idea about humanity than what she had prior to escaping. And it's not a good look. It's not a good look.
No, it's not a good look. And I don't think humanity as it is a good look. So I think it's pretty accurate. And yeah, I agree with you. She has been in love with humans for a very long time and what humans represented in the outside world. But the truth of it, the whole truth of it, is a lot more shocking to her and a lot darker than she thought it would be.
So we now have Lacey, and she and Natalie are living in the casino with our friend, or with her friend, our friend. And again, Mister is looking for her. He has the cop that's under his finger out searching. Who is the idea of Mister? Who is this character? What is his role in this universe of Lacey, other than being this brothel owner? He definitely seems to be more than that.
Absolutely. I think, Mr. He's a lot more complex, and I think we'll learn more about him, particularly in issue 4. But just like any of our other characters, whether it's Danson or Benson, they're complicated people with complicated pasts. And because of what they've been through, it causes them to act in ways that are either really good, like Benson does, who comes to Lacey's rescue, or really bad, like Danson does, who, gets off on hurting women and gets off on hurting AI like Lacey. And I think for Mr., how his traumas have kind of come to life for him is in this obsession with control, with possession, and particularly control and possession of Lacey and also Natalie and also the other AIs in the brothel.
And so that leads me to this question. And again, folks, if you're not reading this book, you should. But when we look at Lacey and we look at these snippets of Mister's past, we see parts of Lacey in his past. I mean, we see it in Natalie, and Natalie is assumedly his daughter. We see some facial features that they share. We see it even more so in the picture of Mister and his wife at their wedding photo that was in issue 3. You could see these similarities, which makes one think that Mister created her, kind of like you were mentioning earlier with the sex doll, as he was grieving his wife's loss. But if that be the case, what's the idea behind owning her, but also sharing her?
So in terms of sharing her, I think like utilizing her as one of the sex workers in the brothel, I think the thinking behind that was, AI needs to be trained. AI has to interact with human beings in order to understand how to behave like a human being and how to read people properly. And so this was sort of Mister's really fucked up way, excuse my language, I'm not sure if I can cuss on this podcast.
You're totally good.
Of AI training, essentially. And, I think that there's also a part of Mister that behaves very derogatorily towards women as well, too. He's a misogynist at the end of the day, and he is someone who doesn't have the highest respect for women. And so I think this is also part of his sexuality and also part of his psychology. And so that's kind of where the thinking came from.
Okay. We see now at the end of issue 3, they're in the casino, they're in the penthouse. Mars is dead. So Mars went through all of this trouble to have them escape the brothel. He's brought them in, and he doesn't seem that much different than Mister. He declares his love for Lacey, but like Mister, he wants to keep her himself. He doesn't want to share her with the world and let her go out and grow as AI can do. So was it always the plan for Mars to be a Mister type character?
Definitely. What I really want to kind of showcase in Lacey's journey is at the end of the day, she can't wait for a man to rescue her. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to herself because, the world is filled with these sort of Mr. Mars types of personalities. And at the end of the day, the only person that she can really depend on is herself. And so that was really the thinking behind it. And I really wanted to show different shades of evil, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, things might be better in some ways under Mars's thumb. But at the end of the day, what Lacey really wants, what she really craves is freedom.
Right.
And if Mars isn't able to provide that, then the situation isn't all too different than the one she escaped from.
Yeah, and you kind of see that in issue 2 when the escape occurs, because for her, she was really just thinking, hey, he was going to send some folks in and they were going to figure a way to get her out. But Mars sends those guys in and it's a bloodbath. People are dying left and right, and it's not what Lacey was expecting or wanted. So it really points to this idea that Mars ain't no better than Mister, which kind of again leads her to say, hey, I appreciate all this, but I really want more. And I was expecting at some point for him to truly turn into Mister. However, Mister didn't give him the time to get there, because again, by the end of the issue, he's taken out rather brutally, and that's going to lead us into issue 4. But so your background, not only as a comic writer, but you've done screenplay in your career.
Yes.
It seemed as if this was kind of written to where you could probably see this on a screen of some sort. Did that play a role in it when you was putting this together?
I think my background as a screenwriter definitely influences how I write comic books, how I look at story structure and how I look at story beats. Because I have such an extensive history in TV and movies, it's going to influence how I write comics as well, too. And so I really also wanted to bring the sort of cinematic scope and the cinematic angle also to the world of comic books. So being able to, introduce a character and introduce a world in issue 1 and have kind of a rising action in issue 2 and then having a falling action in issue 3 and then kind of coming to our climax in issue 4. When they told me that it was going to be 4 issues, my mind kind of immediately saw the story that way.
Okay.
So I think there's definitely a connection there.
Was it difficult for you to make that transition from a screenwriter to a comic writer? I know you've done some graphic novel type things before. So was it truly hard making a transition from Sarah Cho screenwriter to Sarah Cho comic book writer issue by issue by issue? Or did you kind of have this whole thing played out and just chopped it up?
So it was actually my first graphic novel that I've ever written. This is really the first thing that comic book fans are seeing of me in this medium. But honestly, the transition wasn't that difficult. And I think it's because even as a screenwriter, I write very visually. And I used to be a videographer and an editor. And so, seeing each panel scene by scene kind of came naturally to me just because of the type of writer I am. I don't think all screenwriters would say the same, but because of my background, it was pretty easy for me to transition. And then also growing up, I read comic books. I was a huge otaku. So I was obsessed with manga and anime and things like that. And so, when I was like 11, 12 years old, I did say, like, I was like, it'd be really cool if I could be a mangaka or like something like that, but I'm not Japanese. So I think because I also have that history of being immersed in this sort of medium and in this art form, I think it was also much easier for me to transition.
Okay. Can you see yourself writing a manga?
I would, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I hope that this is not my last comic book. I hope I write many, many more after this because it was so fun. And the final product I'm so happy with. And it was just a really delightful process the entire way.
So you mentioned the panel by panel. So that brings me to the art from Patricia Portrades. How has that relationship been between the two of you?
She is fantastic. She is an incredible artist. And, we definitely have communicated back and forth, but she honestly takes my writing to the next level. Like without her, there would be no Red Light. And so I'm incredibly blessed to have had her on this project. And she brings a very specific eye. Like as a writer, I say what goes in each panel, right? But Priscilla kind of comes and adds an additional layer to that and also brings her own ideas to the table. And so it's been a really great collaboration to have us work together. And I'm so glad we were brought together.
Her line work is beautiful. And I just want to say the colors that's laid on top of it, it really, you mentioned earlier, the cinematic tone. It really makes the whole world of the city of automation just look like something you could see on a movie screen. So it's beautiful, and I really, really, really like it. So we have issue 3 that's out. Again, I don't want to spoil it too much. I've already spoiled it enough by saying that Mars is going to meet his end. But you mentioned wanting to continue doing comics. Without spoiling issue number 4, could we see more of the world of the City of Automation? Is this something that you can actually create your own little universe from?
I don't want to say too much because I think that is definitely dependent on the powers that be. But I will say that I think that the world has a lot of texture and a lot of additional stories that could be told. I think the stories of our protagonists, there's definitely some more that could be mined. And, I think that there could potentially be more that comes out of this universe. But honestly, I'm just excited to be writing in the comic book world in general. And I'm the type of person that has like 1,000 ideas at once. So in addition to, Red Light, there's a lot of other ideas that I'd like to pursue as well, too. So it just really depends where the future takes us and where business mandates take us. And
totally understand.
We'll see how things go. Yeah.
So outside of creator-owned work, what you're doing now with Red Light, if there was one comic or manga, you don't have to keep it to traditional comics. If there was one comic / manga that publisher comes to you and said, pick one, what would it be?
Yeah. Silk in the Spider-Man universe. She's a badass Asian American woman. She has a history of trauma, which I'm a sucker for trauma.
Yeah, spent all those years in that vault with no one there to keep her company.
Absolutely. And, I just think that she's an incredible character. And I'm also all about diversity and having, authentic stories being told from people from that community. And so Silk would definitely hands down be the one that I would choose.
I would not go further than that because I don't want to take away your pitch. I don't want to do that because then you'll be hearing publishers say, we can't use that. But that's an interesting answer. Yeah, again, I remember when she made her first appearance in Spider-Man back when I first started reading it again. And I am happy that Marvel stuck with her because, she had that connection with Peter, being that she too was bitten. But she brought in a level of diversity that Marvel hadn't really stuck on yet. We had a lot of black characters. They were exploring queer characters, but we didn't have a lot of Asian American either. And Silk really was one of the forefront. And I'm happy she's still around, in the world. So that's a good one. I like that especially because it's a character that I like.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So again, issue 4 is coming out in spring. You don't have to sell me on it. The trade comes out, I would guess, if issue 4 is in the spring, the trade will be coming out in the summer. And by the way, we'll have the link so that you can actually pre-order that trade paperback when it comes out. But for someone who is interested in picking up the trade of Red Light, they've never read an issue yet, sell them on it.
I think Red Light is an incredible story, not only because it takes place in this sci-fi futuristic world, but because it's at the end of the day a very intimate human story that's focused on a very intimate human relationship between an AI and a human girl. And I think at the end of the day, it's about agency and about wanting to make our own decisions about our own life. And I think all of those themes are things that we as humans can relate to. And in addition to all of that, there's a lot of blood and sex involved as well, too. So it's a really fun read. And I think reading all 4 issues back to back, hopefully I'm able to take you on this journey that is engaging and is a page turner and will have you falling in love with Lacey and and Natalie very quickly.
Yeah, don't fall in love with Mister, because if you do, we have problems.
Yeah. Or you might have like a kink or some childhood trauma.
You might have problems if you have empathy for the brutality of Mister, because he, from issue 1, my question was how would he meet his demise? And so hopefully that happens in issue 4. No spoilers.
You'll see.
We'll see.
Have to wait and see.
Sarah, thank you so much. So if fans want to keep up with what you're doing in the world of comics or whatever you're doing, because again, you are a screenwriter by trade, how can they keep up with you? How can they follow you?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. It's a personal Instagram, but you're welcome to follow it. And I once in a while post things about stuff that I'm working on. So on Instagram, it's at sarah.h.cho. So you can follow me there. And yeah, hopefully you guys love issue 4. I'm hoping you guys keep following AWA because they're a fantastic company filled with fantastic, honestly, very good-hearted people. And yeah, hope to talk to you guys again soon.
Yeah, again, issue 3 is out on shelves now. Pick it up if you haven't already at comic shops everywhere. Or again, if you're a digital person, you can get it through Comixology / Amazon, Apple, or Google Books. Issue 4 is coming out in the spring sometime. And again, the trade will be out in the summer. I will have the link if you want to pre-order the trade paperback. Please do so. Click that link in the show notes and get your pre-order in for Red Light. Again, I love this story. Again, I picked it up for an entirely different reason, and I'm happy I picked it up, and I'm happy to be wrong about my premise of what it was going to be about. And Sarah, I thank you for making me wrong, because again, I absolutely love the adventures of Lacey and Natalie. I think those two are a perfect duo to put together, because they're both, in many ways, they're both like children.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you did pick it up, and I'm so glad you invited me on your show. And this has been a pleasure.
Sarah Cho, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you for joining the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Hey, you got a second? The Comic Book Spot is looking for comic book fans with something to say. If you're interested in writing reviews of your favorite comic books, or you want to contribute original content with articles like The Top 10 Forgotten Spider-Man Villains, or Why One More Day Was the Worst Thing to Ever Happen in Comics, or maybe Why Indie Comics Saved the Comic Book Industry, then we want to invite you to join our family as a writer. Just reach out and email us at writers@thecomicbookspot.com and let us know that you want to become one of our writers. It's that easy, and honestly, there's no reason not to. You get exclusive access to our staff Discord server, you get early access to comics, and you meet a lot of cool people. What are you waiting for? Just email us at writers@thecomicbookspot.com and let us know that you want to become one of our writers.
So again, I want to thank Sarah for sitting in with me and talking about Red Light, not just issue number 3, but the series as a whole. Again, I am going to post a link to AWA Store if you want to pre-order a copy of the trade paperback when it comes out in the summer. But if you don't want to wait until then, I'm going to go ahead and post links to the individual issues, either the floppy or the digital format, if you want to go ahead and get your read in now. Again, Red Light is a wonderful story. It's very interesting when you look at the notions of how Lacey is growing through these 3 issues in her experience as a sex worker with empathy, as an AI sex worker with empathy, and how this AI is growing just as much as the young counterpart that's with her in Natalie. Again, issue number 4 comes out sometime in the spring, but issue 3 just came out. You can definitely find that at comic book shops everywhere. And again, I'll post links in the show notes if you want to go ahead and look for those back issues of issue 1 and 2 as well. But as always, let's go ahead and finish out this episode with a look at some of the books that have come out over the past few weeks. And first up, I want to look at Radiant Black. And so with Radiant Black, that was issues 28 and 28.5, which is the third leg of the Catalyst War. And again, we get both issues at the same time, looking at the story from the point of view of Nathan being Radiant Black and Marshall being Radiant Black. Because again, remember, before the war started, fans were given the choice of picking who would take over the Radiant full time. And so going through the whole numbers will give you the point of view from Marshall, and then 28.5 will give you the viewpoint from Nathan. And so as we get into this part of the Catalyst War, it has only solidified my personal choice and personal preference of Nathan being Radiant Black full time. Just going OG Nathan. He was the first one to have it. He should keep it. And this kind of shows why. And every time, I read this, in each of the legs or the doors that they've opened in the Catalyst War, it has only made my determination with Nathan being the preferred person to be Radiant Black full time even stronger. So And since the war has started, if you look at it from Marshall's point of view as Radiant Black, Nathan's dead. He's now lost the third door, and in doing so, basically destroyed the city of Chicago. Whereas in 28.5, which is Nathan's point of view, while there is some loss, Nathan just seems to be the more logical person. And in being the more logical person, there is a better outcome. And I don't know if Kyle Higgins is doing that intentionally, from the standpoint of, getting readers to understand, especially if they selected Marshall to be Radiant Black full-time, what they are what they're going to be getting, because Marshall is just a hothead. He shoots from the hip. There's no logical thought that comes from him. He's just bang, bang, bang without putting any thought into the consequences of his actions. He wants to do everything on his own, and it seems each time he does this, something bad happens. Now, again, there's loss from Nathan's point of view as well, and it's heavy. He loses his dad, but the loss isn't as great from a numbers standpoint, and he is consistently relying on assistance from the other Radiants, particularly Red and Pink, to help him handle these doors as they are presented to him. So, again, the fourth door opens up in the next issue 29, that comes out next month. But I hope that by the time this all ends and the final vote is revealed as to who becomes Radiant Black full time, I hope that it is Nathan. I just think he is the more logical choice to hold the Radiant moving forward. So again, that is Radiant Black issues 28 and 28.5 from writers Kyle Higgins and Joe Clark, with art by Marcelo Costa over at Image Comics. Next up, let's shoot on over to Marvel Comics and the Resurrection of Magneto #2, written by Al Ewing with art by Luciano Vecchio. This is going on, again, a part of the whole Fall of X story arc event, whatever you want to call it, that's going on at the same time as Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10. And going all the way back to Sins of Sinister, we know that Magneto is dead. He died when the Sinister clones attacked Arakko. And unlike the rest of mutant kind, we know that Magneto and Storm were not connected to Cerebro, so Charles Xavier was not able to download their consciousness, and as such, they could not be resurrected by the Five. But Storm has taken it upon herself, and she is again more of a godlike figure these days. But she travels to the afterlife, and this is an afterlife strictly for mutants. And there she finds Charles. There she finds Magneto, and he is basically tormenting himself and judging himself, basically recounting the names of all of the victims of his actions, whether directly or indirectly. And the art in this issue, first and foremost, as you go and you look at all these names and you look at how tormented Magneto looks, his eyes, he basically have no eyes. He's bleeding from his eye socket. and he is really, really tormenting himself, and he wants to. He feels that at this point he's dead in this afterlife, and he realizes for all of the stuff that he's done, he is where he needs to be. And Storm gets there, and she sees how he is tormenting himself, and she doesn't necessarily try to talk him out of it. She basically tries to make him see the good that he's done as well. And I mean, he doesn't really want this. And so at a few points he attempts to push Aurora away, and she doesn't go away. Again, she considers Magneto her best friend, especially in these times, and she eventually calms him and allows him to see his eyes basically comes back in this hell that he's putting himself through. And she also allows him to see the good that he has done in his time as well. So it is a really remarkable story of looking back at Magneto's past, because as you see some of the names that are on these walls that he is basically reading out to himself, there are some interesting characters, including the mother of Polaris, who died actually at Polaris's hands. But again, he is not only tormenting himself for the deaths of those he directly had part of, but also those indirectly. So he feels that because he had an affair with Polaris' mother, and Polaris was born from this affair, that the anger that Polaris had when she died, when she and her mother and her stepfather were in this plane causing them to die, he feels he has a role in that. Had he not done what he did with Polaris' mother, he wouldn't have been in that situation. So, he's not just looking at the lives that he personally took, but also those lives that were lost indirectly by his own means. And that is a different type of torment to bring yourself through. And I really enjoy how Al Ewing put that sequence together. In the end, again, Aurora is able to make him see the good that he's done as well. And so then the question becomes, how does he come back, especially considering all that's going on Earth right now. And in seeing the good that he's done, she's also shown him what is going on with Orcus and how they've been able to take over the world and expelled all of the mutants and the torment that Charles has gone through since then. And so, that also pushes him to want to come back. But the question now is how. And that's answered in the beginning of the issue, where there's this flashback with an adventure between Magneto and Namor. And he approaches this sea witch who gives him this key that is supposed to allow him to return from the dead. And she tells him, don't ever lose this key. Don't ever put it down. And he doesn't. And so he takes out this key and turns it in this imaginary door. And you would think that that would be it. It's time to come back. He's coming back. Him and Storm are coming back together. But that isn't the case. They fall into an even darker place. And in this darker place, they face they face a darker being who seems to be ready to test Magneto even further. So we shall see what happens when issue 3 comes out next month. But again, I am enjoying this. I am enjoying this much more than the other two books in the Fall of X, being again Rise and Fall. But I am definitely enjoying this one more than others. And again, that is The Resurrection of Magneto #2, written by Al Ewing and Luciano Vecchio over at Marvel Comics. Let's stay at Marvel and move on over to my comic book crush, that being Sensational She-Hulk, with Sensational She-Hulk #6, written by Rainbow Rowell with art by AWA. Again, this is the 6th issue in the series, and it picks up with Jen facing the consequences of her actions over the last few issues. And if you're following the story, or if you aren't following the story, what's happened is, of course, she and Bruce fought April, the gamma-powered scientist who wanted to be a Hulk like them. So they basically ransacked and messed up most of the neighborhood that she lives in, causing her neighbors to not be fans of hers. And then last issue, she was with Patsy and with Carol Danvers as they fought the demons at the bar that was a favorite of Hellcat. And she's facing the consequences of the damages that have come from both of those incidents. And as a result, Mallory, who is more of a partner but is really still playing the boss role, basically suspends Jen, sends her home for 2 weeks while she tries to clear a lot of things up. And in leaving, she takes the two deviants, Caucus and Ransack, with her because they're no longer able to live where they're living. Earlier in the series, you saw where they've been having landlord issues. But when she gets home, she and Jack, or at least Jack, talks her into taking a vacation, considering she doesn't have a job for the next 2 weeks. And so they take off to this resort that is actually near the sun. And it is Jack's idea to go here simply because it allows the sun's radiation to be absorbed, and he and Jen can have mutual contact without fear of him absorbing her gamma radiation that he typically does when his body isn't full of radiation already. But while there, Jen meets an unusual individual while sitting at the bar, and her name is Ganymede. And if you are new to Marvel and She-Hulk, and more specifically, if you're new to the adventures of Jagger Hearts, Ganymede is not a new character. She has been around for a while, and she has more of a connection to Jack of Hearts than anything. So in Marvel canon, she and Jack were lovers, more or less. She is somewhat of a warrior nun who lives in a vow of celibacy, and she was in this sisterhood or spinsterhood, as she speaks of it, and as they are called in canon. But again, they're all dead. She's the only one left. But by the time the issue ends, this is a really quick read, and by the time you get to the end of the story, Jack shows up, and she immediately recognizes him. So it is going to be really fun to see the story of current girlfriend versus old girlfriend, because I would imagine that at some point those two are going to come to blows, and then it's going to be fun, and I will be there for it. I have loved Jen's growth under Rainbow Rowell's writing. She, still has some confidence issues, but over this run, and this run goes back to the initial She-Hulk series, that confidence has just been growing and growing, and she's been becoming so much stronger personality-wise, to the point where you now see she's being asked to rejoin the Avengers. By the way, Rainbow, if you're listening, please tell Jen to say no. But her strength and her self-confidence has truly become much stronger with Rainbow Rowell as the writer. Now, if there is one thing that I do have an issue with, has been the art. And the art has been good. What I don't like is the fact that here we are at issue 6, and we already have a second artist on the book. The first 3 issues were done by Andres Genolet, and now we have Egg Guerra. And I don't know if it's a planned transition back and forth. I'm not a fan of it. Now, their styles are similar. I prefer Genolet's. It just seems to be a little bit more refined, in my opinion. But if you're following me and the rest of the gang over on the TBU Comic Podcast, you know that we've been having this conversation about the consistency of artists on books, especially those books that are released on a monthly basis. And for the Sensational She-Hulk, it has not come out on a strictly monthly basis. It has taken some breaks here and there, so it's been every other month. Yet after issue 3, we already have a new artist, and I'm not a fan of that. I wish that there would be some consistency and just stick with it. I mean, there are so many other titles, especially in the indie world, where it's one artist for the entire run, and I'm not sure what the issue is in this as well. Again, it's not bad art from Guerra. It's not consistent in terms of having one artist on the title, especially something that's this new. I mean, it's only 6 issues in, so the notion of switching artists up is not something I am a fan of. So I hope that whether it's Guerra or they go back to Genolet, they stick with it and let the run go. Again, it's a monthly book, if that. So there should be no problem with there being only one artist. But again, that is Sensational She-Hulk number 6 from Rainbow Rowell with art from Egg Guerra over at Marvel Comics. So I want to finish up this episode with 2 more books, both of them from Skybound Image and both of them from the Energen universe. First up, Duke number 3, written by Joshua Williamson with art by Tom Rowley. Again, this world building that's been going on with the Energen universe has been nothing short of spectacular. I've truly enjoyed everything that's been going on with this new world. Again, it is not set into the world of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, that Larry Hama is currently writing and has been writing for years. It is its own universe as they build with the Transformers and G.I. Joe and with Boy Rivals. And what Joshua Williamson has been doing with introducing all of these characters, and these are characters that we know from the G.I. Joe universe, has just been absolutely crazy. I mean, we see in this issue, we get introduced to Major Blood, but we also see that he doesn't survive the issue because he's taken out by the Baroness, who we are also introduced for the first time in this issue, where Duke and the Baroness are both jailed in the pit, and Major Blood at Destro's hand, or at least with payment, is attacking the pit in order to get to Duke, because Duke has the flash drive with all of the information about the Transformers and Mars and what they're doing with regards to Energen. And so by the end of the issue, again, Major Blood is killed and he's taken out by the Baroness, who realizes that, yeah, there's a big old bounty on Duke's head. So as payment for Duke helping her escape, as the pit is under attack, she pulls a gun on Duke due to this bounty, which is how the story ends. But again, when I look at what Joshua Williamson is doing and how he is introducing these characters to us, and again, if you don't need to follow Larry Hama's G.I. Joe universe, this is a whole new thing, and we've seen in all of the issues thus far of the G.I. Joe miniseries as well as the Transformers series that they are not afraid to be doing some daring stuff. We've seen Bumblebee killed in the first issue of Transformers. We've seen Major Blood killed here. We've seen just G.I. Joe and Transformers and the entire Energen universe just do things that we would not necessarily expect them to do. And I'm absolutely loving all of it. So we shall see what happens to our friend Duke once we get to issue 4. I don't expect him to die, of course, considering it is his story. But we will see how he and his interaction with the Baroness concludes as they attempt to escape the pit. Because again, it's still under attack by Blood and his forces. So they still have to deal with them as well as getting out of the pit. So we will see how that ends up. So again, that is Duke number 3 from Joshua Williamson with art by Tom Raleigh, who, again, his depictions of these characters, the way Tom draws them, are absolutely beautiful. And anything that has colors by Jody Belair is just A-OK with me. She has always been one of my favorite colorists. So again, Duke number 3 from Joshua Williamson and Tom Raleigh over at Skybound Image. Then finally, you can't talk about the Energen universe without talking about Void Rivals. And with that, we go to Void Rivals number 7, written by Robert Kirkman, with art by Lorenzo De Felici. And so it is back. It took a few months off. I would assume it took a few months off to allow the miniseries on the G.I. Joe side to really be on the forefront, and I appreciate that because it has been good reading those stories. But it is back with issue 7. It is a new story arc that introduced a new character into the world of Void Rivals, and that is the character of Proximus. And if we remember from issue number 6, Proximus is basically this last resort hunter that the Premier wants to go and find Derek and Celaya, as they have made their escape to the northern wastelands near the edge of the Great Ring. And so we are introduced now formally to Proximus, and we find out that he and the Premier are not friends. They are really enemies, and it seems like they've had battle before, that the Premier came out on top with, but when he is reconstituted and he's presented as someone or as something that is not who he once was. He is in this suspended animation where the only way that he can be communicated with before he was reconstituted was through a connection. But he is he's without limbs. Part of his face is missing and it's held together by cybernetics. So there is a lot going on with Proximus that I would assume this battle with Premier has led him to look this way. But when his body is reconstituted through all of these genetic reengineering, I mean, he looks really huge. I mean, almost as huge as the Premier. And so you can kind of see how they might be two individuals that might go at each other for control of what's going on Zertonia. But the other part of the story focuses on Derek and Celia. Again, they are in the Northern Wastelands trying to find a way to make it off of the Zertonian planet and to make it to Agoria. So they are slowly connecting to each other once again. Derek is telling her about the visions that he's been having with regards to the Agorians and the Zertonians becoming one once again. And he's confused about it. But Celia seems to know more than what she's letting on, and she kind of tells him, "Hey, you're a chosen one. Zerta has chosen you to do something, and it's not really known yet. And it seems as if the witches are also in on what's going on, because we get to the end of the story and they're saying, hey, Celia is doing exactly what she's been called to do. I don't know if Celia knows she is on a chosen path or a path that's chosen for her or not. We don't clearly get that in the previous issues. The last thing that we got was when she was speaking to one of the witches and they hand her the device. We don't know if she's accessed that device, if she knows what's going on. We just know she has it. But this has been world building, just perfection as he slowly builds this world. And one of the things that I truly enjoyed with this issue is that it has been a straight story with the Zertonians and the Agorians. And that's not to say I appreciate the introduction or the reintroduction of the characters from the Transformers universe, because again, it makes that connection between Void Rivals and the titles that are currently going on Earth. But this here just allowed the full story to be told without any break from this arc to go into the Transformer side. And I appreciate that. And I would assume that with Transformers going on with Daniel Warren Johnson, that we might see less and less of it. I don't know, but I wouldn't have a problem with that. Again, it just allows the focus to completely be on Derek and Celia and their mission and this story, which I am absolutely loving. If you haven't read my review on the site, it is up there, and I have no problem saying it, that this is my favorite series right now that I'm reading with all of the books that I currently read. Just a wonderful story, just world building at its best. So again, that is Void Rivals number 7, written by Robert Kirkman, with art by Lorenzo De Felici, over at Skybound Image. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Next time we are going to be looking at some new books that are coming out this week. First up, we're going to stay in the Energen universe, and we're going to look at the latest issue of Transformers with Transformers number 6 from Daniel Warren Johnson. We're going to look at Ultimate Black Panther number 2 from Brian Edward Hill with art from Stefano Caselli. We're going to go and look at Avengers Twilight number 4 from Chip Zdarsky with art from David Acuna. And we're going to go back to the X-Men world, and we're going to look at Fall of the House of X number 3 from Jerry Dugan with art by Chetro Morales and Lucas Wernick. And then Adventure Man Ghost Lights number 2 from Matt Fraction and Terry Dodson over at Image. And I might throw some other books in there as well. But again, that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Ben Comic Book Podcast. I want to thank you all for listening in, and as always, for your continued support. Again, I want to thank the folks at AWA, and I want to thank Sarah Cho for sitting in with me to talk about Red Light. Wonderful series, absolutely loved it. But as always, thank you again for your support and for listening in. And until next time, keep reading those comics.